Hello everyone and welcome to the Exalted Wargamer. My name is Stan and it's part 2 of my Vampire Count's Army Painting journey. In a previous video I painted the whole 20-man unit of skeleton warriors using only the colors from the John Blanche paint sets by the Army Painter. It's a solid foundation for the new army, but something feels wrong about it. The unit overall looks okay, but I'm not 100% happy with the color scheme and my painting pipeline. I feel like some steps took too long and brought too little to the overall miniature look. What's more, I tried to use lots of acrylic washes, just because they were included in the paint set. But I'm not a big fan of washes. They just didn't work for me. They are too random, they dry too long, and I just didn't like the finish. So, I decided to change the general approach with my second unit. I will use some underpainting and overlapping layer techniques. What's more, I still will be using only the paints from the Blanche's paint sets. It will help to keep the different units in cohesion, despite different painting techniques applied. But this time, no goddamn washes. Well, almost. Maybe I will use some of them on metal parts, but it doesn't count. And you may ask, why spending that much time on some chaff units like skeletons and zombies? It's completely unnecessary. Just slap some contrast paint and call it done. Well, maybe you are right, but it's not the way I'm enjoying miniature painting. I haven't got any kind of hard time limit, and I just want to enjoy both the painting process and the result. Of course, I will cut some steps that are not too impactful, but I want my miniatures to look as good as possible, no matter if it's a centerpiece monster or a pathetic zombie. I want to learn something new and improve my painting skills with each finished project. And even if you don't want to paint the whole army in this style, you absolutely can use these painting techniques on some elite units or mighty heroes to make them pop. So, I hope this video will be helpful and you will find something new. Now, let's get painting. And as always, I started by applying the primer all over the minis. I used the Vallejo Black Primer, spraying it through the Infinity Sierra Plus airbrush by Harder and Steenbeck. I sprayed it about 30 psi, so no extra thinner required, but it's up to you. Try to avoid overfloods and big pools of primer. Apply it in a 2 to 3 thin layers, covering all the details. After that, I started establishing the underpainting. So, what the underpainting, you may ask? Well, basically I want to create the colorful shadow all over the miniature. In a more traditional style of painting you typically create different shadow for each element. For example, dark brown shade for leather jacket, dark purple shade for red cape, etc. And it sounds kinda right. Each material has its own color, so the shadows will be different on different items. Well, kinda yes. With this approach, we completely forgot about the surrounding light condition. It affects all the colors around. So, to simulate this kind of ambient light on our miniatures, I started by creating the darkest shadow tone all over the model. And first of all, I hit my zombies with all over coat of dark blue and brown mix. After the paint dried, I started to spray the pure dark blue on the lower half of the miniature and to all the lower facing shadow areas. This way, I want to create the feel of ambient light and the interesting color change in our shadows, like some kind of magic glow or reflected moonlight affected my miniatures. So, this way I established the underpainting, but that's not all. To make the technique work, we also need to change the highlight approach a bit. But before I continue, I want to say a big thanks to you, all my viewers, and especially to all my subscribers. You really motivate me to improve and create new videos, covering all the different topics. And if you want more hobby videos and stories of all sorts, make sure to hit this subscribe button right now. It really helps the channel to grow and you'll get more content just like this in the future. So, now let's get back to painting. And to show off how it works, I will start with the skin. I want some kind of grayish decomposed skin on my zombies. We already established the shadow, so I can go straight in the middle tones. And here I mixed some dark blue and reddish brown, roughly 50-50. I diluted the color quite well and started to highlight the skin in a series of semi-transparent overlapping layers. I think with these techniques it's easier to work with a big brush, so I'm using the number 4 Kolinsky brush by Da Vinci. It has a really nice sharp tip, but thanks to the big belly it's perfect for the kind of glaze because the paint stays wet on the brush for a long time. And the other crucial part of this style of painting is to leave some initial underpainting in the shadow. I know it can be hard and feel really awkward, but don't stress too much. Thanks to the consistency of the paint, it requires lots of layers to completely hide the initial shade color. And at this point I decided to add a bit more interest into the skin. I applied a light glaze of dark purple over the nose, eyes, mouth and various open wounds. And of course I painted some dead eyes by putting a tiny dot of ivory to each eye socket. After initial shapes were established, it was time to push the highlights further. I added a bit of ivory to the mix and started to apply it to the most prominent areas, such as ribs, knuckles, nose, etc. I am still working in a series of light glazes, trying to leave the previous tone in the shadows and reducing the area of application more and more. So now I'm trying to move the brush from the shadow areas, pushing the pigment to the most prominent parts. Finally, I added even more ivory to the mix. I painted the brightest highlights only on the places of most visual interest, around the head, on the fists and near the wounds. On the other hand, nobody will look at the feet of your miniatures, especially when they march in ranks and columns. So, for the feet I painted only the most simple highlights. And at this point I also decided to add a bit more life to that undead skin. So I mixed a bit more reddish brown to the original mix and applied it as a light glaze here and there. And that's all for the skin. Now I want to paint all the clothes on the zombies, and to better represent the ragtag nature of this unit I will paint it in a bunch of different colors: browns, greens, blues and some purple. It may sound like a ton of time, well, it kinda is. And I totally understand that you might want to spend too much time on the cheap chaff unit, but for me it's important, and that's how I want this unit to look like. So feel free to use only one or two clothes colors on your zombies. All in all, here I just show the general principles, and it can be easily applied to whatever colors you want. And first of all, I decided to paint all the brown parts, like the trousers on this dude. The base color I'm using here is a black reddish brown. It's really nice warm color, which gives us great temperature contrast to the other zones on the zombies. So I'm applying it in the same way, as a series of semi-transparent overlapping layers. First as a rough sketch and then smoothing it a bit. Next I mixed a bit of this ochre color and started to paint scratchy irregular highlights to represent the old warm leather. Also I reduced the area of application, concentrating on the edges and upper facing parts. And for the final extreme highlight I added a little bit of ivory to the mix. This time I painted it only on rough edges and as a series of random dots and scratches here and there. The ivory is a really strong color, so too much of this highlight might be slightly disturbing. It's better to do less than more in my opinion. So, as you can see, it's not that bad and time consuming. We already established the shadow, so I needed only 2 to 3 highlights. And the last extreme highlight was really deliberate and took me about 15 seconds per miniature. But let's get back to the clothes. I always like to introduce a couple of different leather types in my squad. So, for the warmer variant of the leather I also started with a pure reddish brown. But then I started adding some terracotta instead of ochre. As you can see, it really changed the look of our brown color. And again, all the same principles applied here. Try to paint in a series of semi-transparent overlapping layers and try to leave a bit of the original color in the shadows. Finally, I also added a bit of ivory for the extreme highlights on the edges. This time even less ivory, because it can turn the terracotta to some cartoonish silly pink color. The same 2 brown colors were applied all over the different leather elements through the squad, on boots, belts, trousers, dresses and hoods. But it will be too boring to use only the brown colors, so here you can see how I apply the same methods to the other tones. For example, I use the 2 different dark olive colors for the green clothes and a bit of ivory. For the blue rags it's just some grey and dark blue and ivory. And for the purple, dark blue, dark purple and ivory. and this particular color I used very deliberately, only on some of the soldier-looking zombies. You know, the purple historically was kinda expensive pigment, so it will be strange to paint the peasants' rugs in rich purple. And at this point we're almost done. The last two things left to do are wooden elements and the metals. But luckily these kind of details are quite limited. So let's start with the wood. Some zombies carrying farming tools and one warrior armed with a shield. I want the wood to look old, bleached by the sun and a bit mossy. So I started by applying the dark reddish brown on these elements in the usual overlapping layers technique, leaving a bit of original color in the shadows. Then I started highlighting by adding more and more olive green to the original brown color. This time I'm trying to draw long linear highlights to simulate the wood grain. And for the final extreme highlight, I added a bit of ivory to the mix. This time I put it only on the shield corner and as a couple of wood grain lines over the tool handles. If you feel that the wood look a bit too bright, you can always tone it down with the light glazes of dark and regular olive green. Finally, we need to paint the metal elements. And here I just covered them with this nice dark metal color. In the previous video, when I was painting skeletons, I tried to use some rust effect, but I don't really like how it turns out. So this time I decided to use only a couple of washes. Despite the fact that I'm not a big fan of acrylic washes on most of the areas, I think that over metallic they look fine. So I created a 50-50 mix of Grimdark shade and the warm skin shade and applied it all over the blades, cleavers, farming tools and armor leftovers, trying to avoid the big pools of wash. And after the shade completely dried, I just passed with a light dry brush of the original metal color. Maybe I should add a bit more brown tones to simulate rust. But for now, that's enough. So, now our zombies are painted, and the only thing left to do is to finish the bases. And here is nothing really new. I already showed the whole process in the previous video about the skeletons, the preparation, the pigments and the tufts. So, if you are interested in my basing process, go watch this video. But in the meantime, I painted the whole squad of 20 zombies and sealed the paint job with the AK Ultra Matte varnish. And now it's time for the big reveal. I am really happy that I changed the painting approach with these fellas. In my opinion, they look better on the tabletop than the skeletons. Unfortunately, washes just didn't work well for me personally. I tried a lot, but it just didn't work at all. But painting this way seems easier and more organic for me. And what's more, it doesn't take too much time. I managed to finish the whole 20-man unit in about a week. I will leave the skeletons painted as it is. But for the next units, I will stick with the underpainting methods. And what about you? Which painting approach worked the best for you? Write it down in the comments below. But that's all for today. I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye.